The World Conference on Racism accused of being anti-Semitic. The US pulled out of the first one. Now it's boycotting the second amid claims that Israel is being unfairly singled out. Has the conference been politically hijacked? And what does this mean for the fight against racism? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Shuli Ghosh. Well, it's supposed to combat race hatred and xenophobia, but the upcoming World Conference Against Racism has been undermined before it even starts. The US, Canada and Israel have already boycotted the UN conference scheduled in Geneva next month. Half of Europe could do the same. And it's all because of the wording of a draft document being drawn up for the event. The conference, called Durban II, is a follow-up to the 2001 conference in the South African city of Durban. That year, the US and Israel walked out midway over a draft resolution that criticised Israel and compared Zionism to racism. Washington says it wants the final document to drop references to any specific country. It says the proposed text unfairly singles out its ally for criticism. The draft also calls for restrictions on defamation of religions. The US is concerned that this would threaten freedom of speech. Well, on Friday, the US State Department spokesperson Robert Wood summed up the American stance on the issue. He said this: "The document being negotiated has gone from bad to worse, and the current text of the draft outcome document is not salvageable. As a result, the United States will not engage in further negotiations on this text, nor will we participate in a conference based on this text. A conference based on this text would be a missed opportunity to speak clearly about the persistent problem of racism." Well, to discuss this further, I'm pleased to welcome our guests. In New York, Shai Franklin, a senior fellow at the Institute on Religion and Public Policy. And in London, Abdulbari Atwan, the editor-in-chief of the Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Abdulbari Atwan, if I can start with you. This conference has been accused of being anti-Israel, anti-Semitic. What do you think about it?
Any conference which doesn't praise the Israeli, doesn't actually ignore their atrocities against the Palestinian and the occupied territories, it definitely will be accused of being anti-Semitic or anti-Israelis. This is the problem with the Israeli. They consider themselves above the international law, above criticism. They can go and destroy Gaza and expect the whole international community to applaud them for this destruction. They can go and kill children, kill civilians, and again, they don't want to be accountable for any of these deaths in front of the international tribunal for human rights or for crimes, war crimes. So this is the problem. It is typical Israelis. They boycotted this conference simply because they don't want to be criticized.
But this is supposed to be a world conference on combating global racism. Is this the right platform to once again revisit the plight of Palestinians and Palestinian sovereignty?
Yes, but you know, Israel is practicing racism against the Palestinian, whether the Israeli Palestinians, who representing 20% of Israel population, how many ministers from Palestinian origin, how many ambassadors, you know, representing Israel from Arab community inside Israel. This is racism. People, the Israeli Arabs are fighting for equality. And also look at what happened in Gaza, the excess use of power against hopeless, helpless, defenseless Palestinian. This is the worst type of racism. Also, confiscating lands, building up settlements, erecting about 630 checkpoints or barriers on the West Bank to make the life of people as misery as the Israeli can. So this is worse than what used to happen in South Africa. This is worse than what the apartheid regime practiced against the black in South Africa.
Okay, let
so
me bring Shai
Israel
Franklin
should be
in.
immune from criticism.
Shai, the US is supposed to be a champion in the fight against racism. Why is it threatening to boycott this conference?
Well, let me just preface it by saying that what I'm not going to do today is defend Israel. I think I'm tired of people getting on TV and defending Israel when we need to focus on, as you say, fighting racism and being fair. The fact that Israel may or may not commit certain what are called by Mr. Atwan atrocities, does not mean that Israel is the only racist state. Every government in the world is to some degree racist. To focus only on Israel, I think, is a bit disproportionate. Why is the United States boycotting? Look, the United States, under the new administration, actually engaged over the last couple of weeks in Geneva, which I think was a bit overdue. I can understand why the Bush administration was not in as much of a position to back away from some of the positions it had previously taken. The fact that the administration, the new government, has engaged, has gone to Geneva. I know that, although we don't have a guest from Geneva yet, I understand that the American delegation was received fairly well in Geneva. And I think that helped reestablish some credibility that has been lost. I'm not going to.
Well, I mean,
I'm not going to point
a
the
US
finger.
spokesman said the document had gone from bad to worse, and it was at that point that they decided that they weren't going to attend this conference. The response from the UN High Commissioner of Human Rights said this process should not be about winning political points, but about reducing racism. Is this about winning political points?
Well, of course it is. The Islamic Conference and the Arab League have enough votes in the regional blocs that they can get the agenda, they can get the language they want in the final document. And that's obviously their privilege, because the United Nations is based on member governments. The United States and the Europeans and some of the other governments, including the Israelis, I think are perfectly valid to say we don't want to participate if we don't have the votes. If the Arab League and the Islamic Conference didn't have the votes, they might feel the same way. I think it's unfortunate that what should be a fight against racism has become political, but we could say who started it and who didn't, but it's a fact. And it hasn't started this year, it didn't start last year, it's been going on for many years.
Okay, Abdul Bari Atwan, Shai has a point there. I mean, the draft document is supported by countries like Iran, like Libya, which of course have a vested interest in criticising Israel. Why should the US attend something which it sees as fundamentally flawed?
I was shocked when I heard that the United States decided to boycott the conference, because I think it has the best example of actually championing the equality among the Americans.
Really? Do you think so? I mean, the draft committee is chaired by a Libyan. The assistant chairpersons are Iranian and Cuban.
Let me complete. United States elected a black president, so they actually set up a good example for everybody on the international community. Here we are. We believe in equality. We believe in democracy, in human rights. We have this young chap. He managed to make it until the top. So I think they should go to this conference saying to everybody there, the Arabs, the Iranian, the Libyan, everybody, here we are. We are actually, nobody can accuse us of racism. We set a good example for you. But, to say that Israel is singled out, I would like to say something, Shula, here. We Arab, we used to boycott the conferences which the Israeli used to participate. The American used to come to us and say, and also European, and preaching us, you should attend. You should put your point on the table. You should not boycott. Boycott is not helping you. So in the end, when we accepted their preaching and start to attend these kind of conferences, now the Americans are boycotting it and doing exactly what we used to do.
Wait a minute, but it's...
How can we understand that? And also say
boycott. You can't compare the two. I'm sorry, you can't compare the two. Boycotting a conference because Israel will be present is. I'm sorry, boycotting a conference because Israel will be present. I'm not going to call it racism or anti-Semitism, but it is definitely exceptionalism. It has nothing to do with the agenda. The fact that Israel was in the room was a problem for the Arab governments. The fact that they've moved forward from that is admirable. The United States is not boycotting the conference because Libya will be in the room. The United States is boycotting the conference because of the agenda and because of the substance of the outcome document. Those are two very different things. The action is the same, boycotting, but the reason and the message is very different.
Shai, can I ask you, does the US still hope that it can alter the text? I mean, can it do that without the backing of other countries?
Well, I think what happened at the original conference in 2001 was that after the Israelis and the Americans walked out, some of the Western European governments, together with the South African host and the Human Rights Commissioner, were able to make some changes to the document, which I think there were still flaws. From my perspective, there were flaws, or what would be called red flags, in the document, but it did improve the document. Now that the United States is out of the room, perhaps the Western Europeans will be able to make some get some concessions on the language. I don't know that they'll be sufficient, but the torch is kind of passed now. At the same time, The United States has made a commitment to sit in as an observer, at least, at the Human Rights Council session, which convenes, I believe, this week already in Geneva, which is first for the United States since the new council was created a few years ago.
Well, absolutely, and that's surprising, given that the US has also said that the Human Rights Council is anti-Israel. Why has it chosen to do that?
The United States wants to engage. The Human Rights Council is now somewhat a permanent or a long-term institution within the UN. The review conference will come and go in April. So I think, although I think the administration is still figuring out its strategy, which is fair to give them some time, but I think that they think it's long overdue for the United States to at least engage and try to see if there can be some changes to the Council. And the Council has multiple agendas. There's the Universal Periodic Review, looking at country by country. There are special sessions, most of which have actually singled out Israel. There are various meetings that go on from time to time. And for the U.S. to be a member is something to consider.
Abdul Bari Ashwan, if the US doesn't go to the World Conference against racism, does the conference have any credibility? And there's also a question mark over whether some European countries might boycott it as well.
It does have credibility because the majority of the international community are represented there. The problem with the United States, again, they put Israel above the international law and above criticism. The problem with this conference, because America cannot have the veto power to actually protect Israel and to cover up about its criminal acts, like what they did in like the American did actually in the Security Council. This is the problem. The Israeli now are dictating the American foreign policies vis-a-vis the Conference of Anti-Racism. That's the problem, and I'm ashamed that a country which pretend it is the leader of the free world to boycott a conference like this and saying that it is politicized. I would like to refer to the case of South Africa during the apartheid system. It was singled out, and the whole of the international community were against actually South Africa and against its racism, and the American imposed boycott against South Africa. So the same thing happened with Rhodesia and the racial regime there. So why Israel is not treated exactly like those regimes? Why Israel is immune from criticism and condemnation?
Okay.
This is not the Security Council. This is international conference.
I would challenge the notion. I would challenge the notion that Israel is immune from criticism, and I would also challenge the notion that Israel and South Africa together have some kind of exclusive mantle as the racist states of all time. First of all, I don't accept that Israel is a racist state. That's my contention. You have a different contention.
Okay,
no, Israel was condemned by United Nations as a racist country.
Let's just leave it there for the moment, because we are going to have to take a break, but we will come back to this debate. We've got more to come, including the fight against racism. That's after the break. Stay with us.